What's up, airplane collectors? Welcome to a model airplane review. I'm your host, Ray. Today I'll be reviewing the 1:200 scale Amerijet International Cargo Boeing 767-300 freighter variant, made by In-Flight 200 for El Aviador models. In this video, I'll do an in-depth review of the model and its accessories. At the end, I will give my opinion on what I think of the model and whether or not I recommend it to other collectors. The box is a large two-piece box consisting of a sleeve that is made from cardstock and it slides over a blank cardboard box. It measures 29.5 centimeters lengthwise and height-wise, and 11 centimeters wide. I'll show you around the box now. So this is the front, this is the bottom, right side, top, left side, and the back side. Included in the box is the model, fully assembled, painted, and ready to display, parts for extended and retracted landing gear, as well as an all-metal display stand. Here's the model itself. For the majority of today's review, I will have the model with the landing gear extended as well as off of the display stand, but I will demonstrate what the retracted landing gear parts look like later, and I will also show what the model looks like on the display stand. Before we begin today's review, I'll give you a quick 360 of the model. This model is made primarily out of die-cast metal, so it is pretty heavy for its size. The fuselage length is 27.3 centimeters, the wingspan is 25 centimeters, and from the ground to the top of the vertical stabilizer, when this model is sitting on its landing gear, it measures 7.7 centimeters tall. These dimensions are accurate to 1:200 scale. Let's look at the fuselage first. So the nose profile on this model looks really good. It matches the 767. So that looks pretty nice. The overall shape of the fuselage is pretty good as well. With regards to painted and printed detail, there is a lot of both. Mostly printed detail up here, and it looks pretty good as well. So I'm going to move the model so we can look at the rest of the fuselage. The giant Amerijet title looks pretty solid, no complaints. I do notice very small imperfections, as per usual with In-Flight 200 models, but so far they seem to be a little bit lessened on this one. The first one I can point out is this small scratch of blue paint under the red line here. That's really the only one on this side, and I do see a few specks here as well. Which are those? Nope, I believe those are dust pieces. Okay, disregard that, those were just pieces of debris. So lots of detail so far. There's even printed detail for the sealed passenger windows, because this specific aircraft was originally a passenger 767-300. And it's been converted to cargo carrying. And back here we get more painted and printed detail. All of this looks pretty good and no complaints so far. Here's the big vertical stabilizer. This looks pretty good. The molded detail for the rudder is slightly hard to see, but it's still there. It's not filled in with paint up until we get to, well, actually no, yeah, the whole thing is not filled in with paint, which looks pretty good. Now, I've bumped up the exposure on the camera so you can see the molded detail for the rudder. I'm now going to return the camera to normal lighting. And this brings me to my next point, which is the coloring. The blue and the red colors, they're not exactly correct. And what I mean by that is that the blue color is not as saturated as it should be. So it should be a bit brighter blue to match the Amerijet livery correctly. Same with the red. It's not as saturated, it's not as bright. It's a small imperfection, but it was enough for me to notice. I will now show you the right side of the model. Everything I've said about the left side can also be said about the right side. The right side actually doesn't have any imperfections like the small paint smudge that I mentioned earlier that we saw on the fuselage. So far, we're doing pretty good for quality control and imperfections, especially coming from In-Flight 200. Let's move on to the wings. Now, the wing parts themselves are very nicely detailed. There's a lot of control surface detail, especially on the trailing edge of the wing, and you can see it in the light reflection there. However, this model also has a major weakness of In-Flight 200 models, and what I mean by that is that a lot of these control surface details are filled in with paint, especially as we move towards the outside of the wing. Here you can see the aileron is pretty much entirely filled in when we get close to the winglet. And unfortunately, this is also an issue on the right side. Now, the control surfaces on the right wing are a lot less filled in than on the left wing, but once we get close to the winglet, you can see that the aileron is almost completely filled in, which For those of us who prefer symmetry, That's nice, but it's a problem that In-Flight 200 needs to fix. With regards to painted detail, it is pretty extensive, even though it isn't applied the best. The silver metallic paint on the leading edge of the wing looks really nice. It looks really clean as well. So there's that. That was the top side of the left and right wings. There isn't too much printed detail, not that there needs to be, so don't take that as a complaint. Now on the bottom of the wings, there isn't any printed detail at all. There is plenty of control surface detail, and wow, okay, the paint application is a bit more inconsistent down here. I see spots where the paint fills in the control surfaces, but there's also spots where it's very clearly defined. So paint application with the light gray paint was very inconsistent for this model. Like I said, this is a common issue for In-Flight 200 models. Now here's the winglets. The winglets look really nice. The shape itself is almost perfect. With regards to paint application and the fine detailing with the printed detail, it looks pretty good as well. I do see some paint chipping on the leading edge silver there. To be fair, the paint chipping, that I pointed out is ridiculously tiny. You can see some specks of blue showing up right there. So that's the only defect on the winglets, and even then it's almost unrecognizable. Now, let me show you the inside of the right winglet there. Here's the inside of the right winglet. This looks pretty good as well, so the winglets look fine, just the wings do need some improvements with the paint application. Moving on to the horizontal stabilizers, these look pretty good as well. I do see some specks, and oh, please don't tell me that's a stain. Yeah, looks like we got a pretty significant imperfection in the paint here. I'm not quite sure what that is. It feels textured, so I'm inclined to believe it's a contaminant in the paint. It's a paint chip. Dang it, we were doing so well. All right, well, the horizontal stabilizers look pretty good in terms of detail. You can see that there is molded detail for the control surfaces. If the camera would focus, that would be excellent. There we go. All right, so there is molded detail for the elevators, which looks pretty good, and it's not as filled in as some of the details on the wings. I may have spoken too soon, because down here there definitely is some filled in detail with the control surfaces, but it's not terrible. So there's that. And the detail on these is pretty nice. They're mounted to the aircraft quite nicely as well. The seam is pretty smooth. There is that paint chip though, and that's going to mess with me for a bit. Alright, so here's another look at the seam with the fuselage, because I didn't show you for too long. And I'm also seeing, oh, I thought that was a paint defect. Alright, so I thought I saw texturing with the paint, but it's not texturing. It's just specks of dust and trash. Moving on to the engines. Now, the engines on this model look pretty nice. The first thing I did notice, though, is the gap between the pylon and the engine. I believe this is the cowling, the engine cowling. It's pretty large. It's not too large, but it was large enough for me to notice. Same with the joint between the pylon and the wing itself. They're large, but acceptable, in my opinion. Now, the engine itself is quite nicely detailed. If you look at that exhaust nozzle, that looks pretty nice as well. I do see that the silver paint didn't get all the way to the inside of the exhaust nozzle, so some of the white plastic is kind of exposed, or white material, or white paint. I'm not quite sure what the nozzle itself is made out of, but I do believe it's plastic. And here is the fan blade detail, and the fan blades themselves. Now, on the spinner, you can see a spiral. Well, there you go, you can see a spiral. It is terribly aligned, so the printing on the spirals wasn't perfect here for the left engine. The fan blades do spin, so that is nice to see. Let me lock the focus there. There we go, so I can show you that. It is nice to see. Now, I do see two rings that hold the fan blades together. They're pretty visible, and I don't think that's accurate to the 767's engines, so keep that in mind. Now, here's the right engine. They actually got the printing of the spiral aligned, but the spiral design itself, it really needs replacing, because that spiral is nowhere near accurate to any spirals featured on the spinners of the 767 engines. Let's talk about communication equipment and 3D details. So this model features small domes, antennae, and gemmed lights. Here we are at the front section of the aircraft. This is the top of the aircraft, obviously. There is a gemmed light right here. It's a red one, and then I'm not sure which kind of communication antenna this would be, but it's a large one. These look pretty good. They're both fit to the aircraft securely and dead center on the top of the fuselage, which is accurate. So those look nice. We'll move towards the midsection of the aircraft, these are the two domes I was referring to. They are 3D plastic parts. This is something that not all manufacturers include, so that is very nice to see. These look pretty good as well, and they're fitted directly to the center of the aircraft. And we have one small antenna just before we hit the vertical stabilizer. I'm not sure if that's misaligned or not. It does look kind of off it looks kind of twisted is what I'm trying to say. But aside from that, it is fit securely to the aircraft, so there's no fixing that. It looked twisted, but it is not twisted. It is fit straight and perfectly to the aircraft, so disregard my previous complaint. Down here, the communication features get a bit more extensive. On the bottom front section of the aircraft, we have this large antenna right here. It's the same size as the large antennas on the top of the aircraft, only this one has some stripes on it, which is very nice to see. As we move towards the wing joints, or wing roots, if you will, we have this antenna here. Looks pretty nice, no complaints. We have another large antenna towards the rear of the aircraft. It also has stripes, looks very nice. And then another one of those antennas, like the one near the wing root. This looks really nice as well. The antennas on this model and just all of the 3D details looks pretty good. And really, I don't have any complaints about them. And here in the almost dead center of the aircraft, we have another gemmed light. The bottom of the fuselage and just the aircraft itself is definitely not lacking in detail. It looks pretty nice. I'll just try and show you some of the details here. They look pretty smooth, so I really don't have any complaints about it. That's what I'm trying to get at. There we go. Now let's move on to the landing gear. The landing gear on this model are interchangeable as mentioned earlier. You can have them extended or retracted. I believe as of right now, In-Flight 200 is in possession of the only 1:200 scale 767 mold with interactive landing gear. So it definitely has an edge over its competition. The main landing gear, extended parts and retracted parts are attached via a system of magnets. Here is the piece for the left main landing gear. It looks pretty nice. The wheels are made out of rubber and they do roll pretty smoothly. And the gear does pivot, which is accurate, and it pivots very smoothly. So the main gear parts are very nice. Now the nose gear also attaches through a magnetic attachment. The extended part has a magnet, the retracted part does not, and I will demonstrate that shortly. Here is the nose gear part. It looks really nice. There is printed detail on there, which is excellent. Gemmed lights, and the wheel rolls. I do see a bit of staining on the wheel though, or on the rim rather. It rolls not too smoothly, but it rolls, and the wheel itself, or the gear itself, pivots a full, well, not a full 360 degrees, but it pivots within a range that is accurate to the 767. Now I'm going to attach the retracted gear parts for the first time. I haven't done this since I opened the model, so hopefully that... Okay, actually that was very smooth. So I'm attaching the main gear parts right now. There we go. So, as mentioned earlier, this is the retracted piece for the nose gear, and as you can see, it does not have a magnet. So, we'll see how it fits into the model. So, this makes it a friction-based attachment. Now, the retracted parts fit very nicely to the main gear parts, or the retracted main gear parts fit very nicely to the model. There is almost no seam between the wing and the retracted part, which is very nice to see, so the fit is great. Now the nose gear part, it's pretty nice. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, especially considering that it is a curved part. Now for these parts, you can see that there are slight gaps in the parts themselves, and those are for the included part removal tools, which are made out of plastic. There are two of them. They're very sharp, so watch your fingers, and now I'm going to demonstrate how to use them. So we'll take out the nose gear part first. Comes right out. And with the main gear parts, they come right out as well. Very easy, very straightforward process, very good design in my opinion. And we'll put the main landing gears back. Where'd the other one go? Great, there we go. Time for the signature steering contest. Here we can evaluate engine clearance, gear balance, cockpit window printing, all that fun stuff. So the wing flex looks good. It looks maybe a little bit high, but within acceptable margins. The vertical stabilizer looks perfectly straight. Horizontal stabilizers don't look to be mounted at too high of an angle. Gear balance looks good. Engine clearance looks good. Cockpit window printing looks excellent. So no complaints up here. Very nice. I'd like to address a small detail on the cockpit windows with this model. Here on the right side, you can see that the frames of one of the cockpit windows is painted red. Now you may be wondering, is this an accurate detail? Yes, it is. Some Amerijet cargo planes have one, or I'm not sure if multiple, but at least one of these frames are painted red. So it's asymmetrical, but it is an accurate detail. The last thing I'd like to discuss for today is the all-metal display stand that is included with this model. It's heavy, it's pretty sturdy, the paint application on it looks pretty good, and it includes a very large foam cushion to prevent damage to the paint and the finish of your model when it's propped up on the stand. So here's what the model looks like on the stand. The fit is rather loose, as you'll see. The model does have the tendency to go tail down, nose up, but it's not loose enough to the point where the model will fall off. So the included stand is sturdy enough to hold the model. If you wiggle it, it's not loose at all. So if you want to display your model on the stand, I can safely recommend the included stand. Now time for my opinion and recommendation. So this model is quite nice actually. The quality, it's obviously not perfect. No die-cast model has perfect quality, but it's very nice. The model is very detailed and it has fewer imperfections than I anticipated. Not to say that it doesn't have imperfections, because it definitely does, but In-Flight 200 didn't screw up as hard on this model as I thought they would, because historically speaking, In-Flight 200 has messed up a few models for me, and their reputation isn't really the greatest in my collection. So I do recommend this model, but proceed cautiously. Be mindful of the imperfections that I pointed out with the paint being overfilled on or paint being applied too much on the wings and the horizontal stabilizers. That's really the only thing that I can guarantee will be an issue on this model. Some of the other things that I can say to watch out for is particles and trash and dust on the model. A lot of In-Flight 200 models come with a lot of these extra things on the model, and you can just wipe them away, but be cautious of the fact that, yeah, you'll have to clean your model when you get it. So that's the end of my review. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any more of my future reviews as well as model airplane comparisons. But that's all I have for you today. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more model airplane content. Happy building, happy collecting, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.